He said, I'd love to be an outsider. Outsiders are cool, but we're not. We're insiders.
Today, we're going to answer this question. Why did Cenk Uygur leave MSNBC? By 2010, the Young Turks had grown into one of the most popular progressive online news shows. Cenk Uygur's outspoken, fiery critique of the so-called corporate influence and establishment politics resonated with viewers, gaining the attention of mainstream media outlets like MSNBC. Cenk began guest hosting for the Dylan Ratigan Show on MSNBC in 2010. His performance was well received, showcasing his ability to engage audiences with sharp political analysis and his energetic on-screen presence. Impressed by Cenk's appearances, MSNBC executives offered him a spot in January 2011. His program replaced the Ed Show, hosted by the late Ed Schultz, in the 6 p.m. slot. Cenk's style on MSNBC did not diverge too much from the Young Turks. It was characterized by his passionate, confrontational, and often fiery delivery. Cenk was a harsh critic of the GOP, especially the Tea Party movement.
But I have to be honest, I think they're suckers. I think they get easily duped by groups like Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Works, which are corporate-sponsored groups. And so instead of going to protest Wall Street, which is where all their efforts should be, they go protest in favor of healthcare companies. I mean, boy, did they get led around by the nose. And they got to feel kind of silly right now. Why aren't they out there on Wall Street protesting, hey, why did you take our money? They don't have to join the labor protests if that makes them uncomfortable. Do their own protests. I've been challenging them since the beginning of the year. I dare them to prove me wrong.
He was also a harsh critic of Obama.
War in Afghanistan by adding 30,000 troops. He passed healthcare reform, but in my opinion, Obama gave in to Republicans on many of the important details. Point one, there's no public option. Point two, we're not even allowed to negotiate with drug companies. And the president took out the provision on allowing immigrants to buy insurance. This after Congressman Joe Wilson had this outburst during the president's major healthcare speech before Congress.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally.
Well, they gave in to Wilson, and they gave him exactly what he wanted a week after that you lie outburst. Obama also passed financial reform, though, but the big banks are still too big to fail. They can still do derivatives trading, and the bill is riddled with loopholes that Republicans insisted on. Obama has also famously caved into conservatives by firing Van Jones, defunding Acorn, then briefly firing and rehiring Sherrod. This leads to the question of whether he's really delivered on his promise of change or whether he's just been too weak.
However, after having a nearly 6-month tryout on the channel, MSNBC decided to move Cenk to a weekend slot. Cenk refused and left the channel. So what happened? Why did Cenk leave? First, let's hear out how Cenk explained his departure.
Interesting news. Here it is. I am out at MSNBC. Now, whose decision was this? Well, it was both of our decisions. I will explain, okay? In turn, not at the same time. I got pulled in, and they told me, hey, listen, we were just, or it was actually one specific person, the head of MSNBC. He said, I was just in Washington, and people in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. I was like, whoa, what? You know, despite all the things that I've said about the mainstream media, I still viewed that as kind of like theoretical. Like a real person, are they really going to say that? I was like, and I'm naively thinking, what does he mean? Did he talk to his friend Bob in Washington? Why would you say people in Washington if you meant, oh, yeah, I was talking to my buddy down at the shop about you. It just happened to be that he was a person in Washington. You wouldn't frame it that way, right? But I'm still thinking that. And then he gives me the second part of the speech. Hey, listen, Cenk, outsiders are cool. And they wear, I think he might have said something like, they wear leather jackets, they ride bikes. I think I'm an outsider. I don't ride a bike. But I have a terrible leather jacket. Anyway, he said, I'd love to be an outsider. Outsiders are cool. But we're not. We're insiders. We are the establishment. And I just kind of sat back. I was like, wow, this is it. This is the speech. So he said, look, you got to tone it down. And then he had me talk to one of their top contributors who explained, hey, listen, just take it easy. You're a little tough on the guests, and tone issues, and let's have more Republicans on, which was an interesting thing. By the way, I have no problems with that because I'm not going to have a Republican on and play patty cakes with them. Whenever I had Republicans on, I challenged them, and I enjoyed that. So no problems with that. So I get that speech, and when I walked out of the office, I didn't say anything to him when I heard it. And when I walked out of the office, I thought, oh, that's it.
So, long word short, executives at MSNBC implied that government insiders were discontent over Cenk's fiery criticism and sent MSNBC a memo to hire Cenk away on weekend slot. Cenk refused and later left the channel. Was this really what happened? Fortunately, there was a New York Times article documenting how Reverend Al Sharpton replaced Cenk Uygur on the 6 p.m. slot. According to Phil Griffin, the then head of MSNBC, Cenk earned solid but not standout ratings, so he decided to try out Reverend Al.
We never told Cenk what to say or what not to say. In an interview on Wednesday, Mr. Griffin denied Mr. Uygur's accusations and sounded disappointed that he had decided not to accept the weekend position. We never told Cenk what to say or what not to say, Mr. Griffin said. The people in Washington, he said, were MSNBC producers who were responsible for booking guests for the 6 p.m. hour, and some of them had said that Mr. Uygur's aggressive body language and overall demeanor were making it harder to book guests. The conversation was, hey, look, here's how we can make it better, about physical things on the show, Mr. Griffin said. Mr. Uygur's audience on The Young Turks webcast, which is separate from MSNBC, is younger than the audience on cable television, Mr. Griffin added, suggesting that the two demographics require different manners of speaking. Dan Pfeiffer, the White House communications director, said in an email Wednesday that his staff did not raise any concerns about the show with Phil Griffin or anyone else. I didn't agree with everything said on the show, but certainly didn't have any problem with it, Mr. Pfeiffer added.
Now we have a he said, she said situation. First, let's dial back a little bit and look at a bigger picture. The reason Cenk was brought on as a guest and later as a host on MSNBC was because the channel at the time was positioning itself as a left-wing version of Fox News. Cenk's progressive voice perfectly aligned with the channel's marketing strategy. The reason Cenk decided to join MSNBC was also quite simple. He saw the move as an opportunity to bring his progressive message to a larger, more mainstream audience. The partnership was mutually beneficial. If we buy into the MSNBC side of the story, the logic remains sound. Phil Griffin gave Cenk a shot because he liked what Cenk had to offer as a guest. Cenk failed to deliver the ratings Phil had hoped for, so Phil decided to replace Cenk with Reverend Al and move Cenk to a lower tier weekend slot. Everything here adds up. If we buy into Cenk's side of the story, though, not anymore. Since the guy before Cenk was Ed Schultz, someone just like Cenk who heavily criticized not only the Republicans but also the Obama administration. And the guy after Cenk was Al Sharpton, another Cenk-like character. He was a well-known civil rights activist and radio host infamous for his strong, controversial, and sometimes racially charged narratives. Neither of them was a milquetoast liberal who paddled a line safely and covered for the Democrats. It was true, however, that neither Ed Schultz nor Al Sharpton shared the aggressive body language of Cenk. And lastly, let us listen to Cenk once again.
Hey, listen, Cenk. Outsiders are cool. And I think he might have said something like, they wear leather jackets, they ride bikes. I think I'm an outsider. I don't ride a bike. But I have a terrible leather jacket. Anyway, he said, I'd love to be an outsider. Outsiders are cool. But we're not. We're insiders. We are the establishment. And I just kind of sat back. I was like, wow.
Listen closely to these quotes. Outsiders are cool. They wear leather jackets. But we're not. We're insiders. We are the establishment. This does not sound remotely like how people like Phil Griffin would speak. However, it sounds exactly like how Cenk Uygur speaks. Here's my conclusion: Cenk was lying.
Of course!